Welcome to the BLC Podcast, a ministry of Bethlehem Lutheran Church, ELCA, St. Cloud, Minnesota. In this episode, we'll be diving into our Lent theme of love being greater than despair. And on this episode, we have a special guest who has lived through some really hard things in his life. Without giving too much of his story away, I do just want to let people know that in this episode, we talk about family trauma and suicide. Please take care of yourselves, and if you or somebody you know is suffering from suicidal thoughts, please reach out and text or call somebody at the number 988 anytime, day or night. The calls are free and confidential. You can also find resources for you or others at 988lifeline.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of the BLC Podcast, and the Lord be with you.
Okay, welcome to the BLC Podcast. We are back with a brand new episode here for this season of Lent. Thank you for joining us. On the podcast today, we have a special guest that Pastor Chad is going to be interviewing. We are on the topic of God's agape love throughout the whole year, but especially in this season of Lent, we're talking about how God's agape love is greater than despair, which really hits home, I think, for this episode. So I'm going to turn it over to Chad, and he will introduce this episode a little bit further and let you know who we're going to be talking to today.
All right, Matt, thank you very much. So, yes, this season of Lent, we are looking at continuing our theme of agape, how this unconditional kind of love meets us just as we are for who we are. But specifically during Lent, it focuses on this idea that love is greater than despair. And when I listen to people talk these days, there's a lot of people who are very, I would say, just tired. They're tired of a lot of things in life. They're tired of a lot of the politics. They're tired of some of the things they see in the world. They're tired of people being hurt. They're tired of so many things. And despair is something that easily sets in. And so we want to be about helping people not ignore what goes on around us, but live in a way that acknowledges the reality of life, but also in a way that moves us beyond despair. And so I was thinking, boy, would it be great if we could find somebody, Matt, to have a conversation with, to talk about this with. And interestingly, it was 2 days ago almost where I sat down with Wayne. And Wayne wanted to share his story. That's why we initially got together. He reached out and said, I would love to share my story with you. Would you want to hear it? And I'm like, yes, because I love listening to people's stories. I always appreciate that. And I wasn't sure what he wanted to share. And when we met and when I listened to him, I was blown away by his story. And I was like, wow, this fits so well into this season of Lent, into this theme, and into the story of God's agape love. And it's an important message. And so I have Wayne here with us today. And Wayne, just to start, do you just want to do a quick intro with who you are?
Well, I'm a retired educator. We moved to St. Cloud in 2012. We'd spent 42 years in Wilmer, and I worked at the high school for 33 years as a special needs teacher, and I also coached the girls' swim team for 22 years and a few other coaching assignments. And I just needed to have that conversation with Chad because I think there are some things in my life that have gone on, and there's no way I can ever explain them. I've looked at them from all directions, and I just can't explain how I got to where I am, except that somebody led me, and it wasn't somebody here.
Yeah, and it is a fascinating story. And again, I want to be able to share this with everybody. So Wayne, I'm really going to just kind of kick it to you and ask any kind of clarifying questions as needed as we go. But I would love just for you to share with everybody listening essentially kind of what you shared with me the other day, if you're open and willing to do that.
I would like to do that. This all kind of started, as I remember, when I was in 5th or 6th grade, and when I would leave the house in the morning to go to school, and we did walk to school in those days.
Uphill both ways? Is that how that worked?
Uphill, yeah, it was. Anyway, She would say to me in the morning before I left, if you can't find me after school, I'll be in the water hole. And the water hole was there was a contractor across the street from us that they were taking sand out of the ground for roads, streets, whatever. And as you take it out, the water level was such that there was a water hole there, as she called it. And I'll come back to that after a bit, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I was downtown shopping for clothes. School. I'd worked at a summer camp that summer, and I was downtown shopping for clothes, and I'm looking at this pair of pants and whatever, and one of the high school sophomore football coaches came in and said, how come you weren't at practice this morning? I'm like, nah, I'm not going there. My mom thinks I'm going to get hurt, so she won't let me play. And he said, you show up tomorrow. I'll take care of your mom. And I did show up the next day. And the reason I bring that up is, for whatever reason, he happened to be in the place I was, and he moved me in a direction that I ended up playing football. And as it would happen, people tell me I was a good high school athlete. They have to tell me that. I don't know if I was or not.
Yeah, you can say that you were.
Well, you know, I started on the high school football team for 3 years. I was all conference 2 years. I was all conference in basketball my senior year. At the conference track meet, I won 100, 220, 440. So, you know, in a sense, I guess maybe I was a relatively good athlete. But you see, had I not started with, you better go to practice tomorrow, I don't know that would have happened. And so that, to me, I'll be quite frank that as these things happen through life, I didn't think much about them. But after the things that I had been through and looking back, they happened for a reason. And I can't explain them other than I was in the right place at the right time, and the powers above helped me get to where I am. That's all I can say. And I have said that sentiment to more than one people. I'm so fortunate to be who and what and where I am. And then, also in high school, between my junior and senior year, we had a new basketball coach. And my senior year in high school, I really struggled a lot because I was expected to go home after school and help my stepdad, who was not a particularly nice guy. He worked in a junkyard, and he'd bring home radios. And I'd have to cut the wire out of the radios and throw them in a burn barrel. And then he would burn the copper wires to get the insulation off so he'd have copper left. Then he would take that money to buy alcohol because both my parents were alcoholics. So I didn't have, my grades weren't the best. And so this new basketball coach is also a guidance counselor. And one day at school, I just can't handle this anymore. So I went into his office and announced to him, I'm quitting school. I'm going to join the Army. I'm going to do something. I just can't take this anymore. And he said, oh. And so he said, well, you just go ahead and finish school. And he went to my house and talked to my mom to see what was going on. And so how do we figure out how to do this homework? Well, it seemed like at least twice a week, he and his wife needed to go shopping, so they needed somebody to watch their two girls. So I was there to study, and then he would take me home afterwards. So I was on the school board in Wilmer, and people would talk about athletics and that kind of thing, and are they really worth it? And there's so many intrinsic things that kids learn, and had it not been for high school athletics, I don't know where I would have been, but I was able to focus on that. I had a life at school, I had a life at home, and they were not congruent. And then we were living in Wilmer, and I got a call one night.
Now, is this, when you're living in Wilmer, is this as an adult or where?
Yes, no,
Okay.
this is as an adult. We
Okay.
moved there in 1970.
Okay.
And we moved back here in 2012.
So you made it through high school, and then your life progresses, and then you move to Wilmer, and that's where you're at right now in the story.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so I get a call from my stepdad who tells me, your mom's on the floor and she's got something yellow coming out of her mouth. And I said, call 911. And he said, no, you get over here. Well, it's 60 miles. So I hustled over there, and she was lying on the floor in the living room, and there was yellow stuff coming out of her mouth, and I called the ambulance, and they took her to the hospital. She had taken a bottle of Tylenol and had eaten some drain cleaner. And so I went to the hospital up there, and all she said was, I said, why did you do that? And she said, you know why. And I did. She'd talked about suicide her whole life. And she said, I messed up. She said, I didn't do it good enough. And so a week later, I get a call from my stepdad again, I can't find your mom. So I came over. I couldn't find her either, but I knew where she was. She was in the water hole. I knew that.
You just had that feeling?
I just knew it. I mean, that's the only place she could have been. So then I come back the next day, and I observed the Stearns County Water Patrol find her in the pond and put her in a body bag. And to this day, I regret having done that. So anyway, just put that aside. And so about 5 years ago, Medicare has this annual wellness visit that you take. And so in the doctor that I have here, I had in Wilmer, he moved over here to be with the residents from the U. He's an assistant professor over here. So he was my physician in Wilmer. So I have my wellness visit, and we're talking, and he says, you know, you seem like you maybe are down a little. Maybe you need a little help with something. And I said, well, yeah. I said, that might be beneficial to me. And he said, well, we have somebody here that's a therapist that works with the residents and also works with patients. And so he said, would it be okay if I got her? So he got her, and she's been my therapist since. And we have gone through a lot. And back, about 2.5 years ago, I was coming out of a store, and there was a liquor store there. And I looked at the liquor store, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'll go in there. And I went right to the wine racks because I was going to get a couple of bottles of wines and a couple of bottles of wine and go home and get drunk. I don't drink. So that was totally out of character for me. And I realized something is not right. So we worked on these things for quite some time, and I just could not put things together. So she suggested to me one day at a therapy session, maybe you would benefit from IOP. And I said, what is IOP? And she said, that's an intensive outpatient program with group therapy. And I said, nope, I don't like group therapy. I never liked losing weight in groups or any of that thing. No, I'm not going. Nope, I'm not going. And she said, well, could I just refer you to that and see if, I'll just make a referral and see what they say. And I said, well, that's okay then. So she makes the referral, and then I came back later, and a week later I was seeing a therapist once every 10 days or so, and I came back and she said, well, they accepted your referral. She said, you could start next Tuesday, and this was like a Thursday. And I said, well, I'll think about it. And then I got a call on Friday from the behavioral unit at St. Cloud Hospital, and they going through the things, and they said, they were giving me the time frames, and I said, oh, I didn't want to go, so I'm saying to myself, oh, I volunteered that morning. I can't go. That's the reason I don't have to do this. This won't work for me. And so I said that. I said, well, I'll have to get back to you. And then I didn't meet with my therapist on that Monday again. And she had a residence in there, and we talked, and I was a student teacher once. I like residents. I don't mind having these young people come in and talk to me because they're going to run into people like me someday. And so I thought it would be good. And so we talked, and then I left. And I came back on Monday because I had a session then. And she says, well, what do you think? And I said, I don't like group therapy, but I'll try it tomorrow. So I went out there on Tuesday, and you have an intake evaluation. They did the evaluation, and then I went to the therapy group. There were like 6 other people there because group therapy is just that. It's group therapy. And all of the people there have the same, no, not the same. They all have issues that they're dealing with. They're not the same, but nonetheless, they affect people the same. So we go through that first hour. And then the second hour, we're going to have arts and crafts. And I said to the lady, her name was Marge. I says, Marge, I don't like arts and crafts. I don't want to do arts and crafts. I don't like them. And she says, well, just go ahead and try it. And so I did. And then we came back for the third hour, and she said, and after that, the therapist running the group said, you going to be here tomorrow? I said, I'll think about it. And so I went home, and I thought about it, and so I thought I'd give it another day. And I went back the next day, and I stayed. It's a 45-hour program over 5 weeks. And I went there, and I went through the whole program. But one of the instances there, I had never forgiven my mom for what she had done. Nothing. I mean, I would be upset when I thought about it. But then going through the therapy and the rest of it, it's like, I told the group on the 3rd of October, today was the day that my mom died by suicide. And I'm going to go to her grave today, and I'm going to kind of cuss her out a little bit, and I'm going to forgive her. And then I looked, and I said, I did that. And when I walked away, I kind of smiled because I remembered another thing, that when my mom passed away, my stepdad and my stepsister, who told me Mom would never have killed herself if I'd come to visit more often. And so I had to pick the dress out that she was buried in. And so I'm walking away, and I'm like, I kind of smiled because I picked the dress out that she was buried in. And so I went back, and I told these people that story. And I for 31 years, suffered because I thought I had been abandoned, and I thought my mom didn't love me enough to stay living. And so as I'm going through this in that group therapy, one of the gals, I had heard this gal in therapy say that my kids would be better off without me. And another gal that was like, another gal that had those tendencies also. And they both looked at me and said, God must have sent you here because I don't want to put my family through what you're going through. And so, and it was like, and the next day I find out, on that Tuesday I was there, Wednesday I came back, they had a clinical evaluation. And I looked at it, actually I'd looked at it the night before on my chart. And the evaluation said recurring depression, suicide ideation, and PTSD. And in the group therapy, I was talking about a time when I was at the Y and I went out to my vehicle and I had just had coffee with my son, and I was saying to I was crying and I was saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me for what I'm going to do. I'm really sorry. And I'm like, I relating this, and I told him, I said, it was a dark hole. I like to think I'm a logical thinker. I had no logic, nothing. There was nothing there. There was nothing. I didn't care about anything. And the gal that was sitting there said, I know God sent you to me because I felt that way too, and now I find out I'm not crazy. So these things just tying together. And with the PTSD thing, about 2.5 years ago, there was an incident back in the 80s that I had completely buried in my mind. I mean, it was gone. Until about 2.5 years ago, there was an incident where it all came flooding back. All of a sudden, here it is. And with my PTSD, when I get triggered, I see that whole sequence as a video in my mind as to what's going on and why. And I can't explain that. I tried to explain it to people, but it goes straight to that, and then I have to step back and try and use the coping skills that I've acquired to get past that. And I've been working on that, and Chad, there was December 21st where you had the longest day.
Yeah, I remember that. It was we do a longest night service as part of our Christmas, season, because as we always do mention here, like the holidays are not a good time for everybody. And we want to make sure that we provide opportunity for people who are not feeling the best to be able to come and still be present for this time of year. So yes, we do have that longest night service, and I do remember seeing you there.
Yeah, and the reason I ended up there that night is because of something called a Stanley Brown safety plan. And a Stanley Brown safety plan is something I put together with my therapist that when I feel myself spiraling, I know what to do and where to go and how to get out of it. And as I told you that night, Chad, you may not remember this, but I found a safe, holy place to sit. And I sat back in the corner. I didn't participate in it, but that was the place I needed to be that night. My therapist was not real happy when she asked about when I suicide. Yeah, I said, I thought about it. She said, do you have any weapons? I said, yep, I have a handgun. Tell me the bullets are somewhere else. No, the bullets are with a handgun. She said, you got a trigger lock on it. I said, no, I don't have a trigger lock on it. And she said, you have to promise me, I'm going to give you a trigger lock. You're going to have to promise me that you're going to go home and you're going to put it on there and you're going to send me a picture showing me that you did that, because if you don't, I'm going to have a welfare check. And so, I go through all of these things and I bring these things up. And now kind of the background. When we left to go to Wilmer, I escaped from here. I escaped. And so my wife wanted to move back here because her grandkids were here and her mother was here. And so I got elected to a board over there for 8 years, so I put it off for 8 years. And then she wanted to move back here, and I just kept pushing it off. I didn't want to come back here. And so I can take you to the pew that I was sitting in at Bethel Church. And I'm saying to myself, I'm not going. I am not going back. And something in my mind, a voice, whatever, said to me, it's okay. You need to go. And as I look back over the last 12, 13 years, I did need to come here. There was a reason for me to come here. If nothing else than the two women that I talked to in group therapy. So and it's just, and I'll just mention one more thing. When I went to Wilmer, my idea of coaching would have been basketball because I played it. I ended up coaching wrestling, which I didn't wrestle. I coached track, which I did do. But the athletic director said to me one day, "Would you like to earn a few extra bucks?" Yeah, my hand went up. So he had me go score a swim meet. And no, it wasn't difficult, but the gentleman that was doing the starting, he would fire the gun and people were already out over the water when the gun went off. And I'm saying to myself, I can do better than that. So then I go and get myself registered to officiate swim meets. And then the girls' swim coach got sick. And so I said to myself, yeah, maybe I'll apply for that. So I applied for it, and the athletic director says, "Do you have a life-saving or a water life-saving certificate?" No. So I took a lifeguard class. I'm 38 with a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds. And I have to say, they were really kind to me because they didn't put up any kind of fight when we had to, jump in and bring them to shore. Actually, it was a pool. And so, long story short, I ended up being the girls' coach. And I'm kind of maybe going to end this a little bit by, I had I had sent a message to one of the gals that I coached a long time, 30 years ago, it had to be more than that. Anyway, she has 2 grandkids now, so that kind of puts mine. But anyway, I had indicated to her that, I had suffered with depression my whole life, and I just didn't seem, but I told her I will be eternally grateful for the opportunities that I was afforded to work with each and every swimmer I encountered. I have been given many gifts from God. Thank you again. May God continue his blessing on all of you. And she wrote back, "You have no idea of the impact you have had on so many young women. God knew that you were the right man to step in and to minister to all of us by a pool. God calls us, even in our brokenness and imperfection, to impact those around us for him. When we are humbled and realize we can't do it on our own strength or skill, he fills in the gaps. I am forever grateful that our paths crossed on this side of heaven. It will be pretty awesome to sit by a pool in heaven and recall all of the great memories we had in this short season called life." And that to me was an uplifting. It made me realize I'm here for a purpose. I smiled, and again, I'm eternally grateful for who I am, what I am, and where I am. And I will say that I will talk with anybody about mental health. I don't think mental health in this country is given what it needs. And I mentioned to Chad when we met, that if I had pancreatic cancer and told somebody I got stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the answer would be, "Oh my, yeah, I really feel bad for you. What can I do for you?" And I've had this other situation occur where I'm like, yeah, I have mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you can almost see it in their face. And it's like mental health issues are as dangerous or as bad as stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Yeah. Because it opens doors for people that shouldn't be opened.
Yeah. Yeah. Wayne, thank you. That story, it just kind of like recapping those major life moments. Just going from when you were a kid growing up with a mother and just in a tough family where trauma was experienced, to having a mother who ended up committing suicide. You were there as they took her out, to dealing with depression and thoughts of suicide of your own, to the other things that just these different events that you've done in life that have made a positive impact in people. And yeah, it's such a good story. Here's a question for you though, because one of the reasons I wanted you to share your story is, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to, because it's not polite. I'm not going to ask your age, but because I'm not going to do that. But I will say, generally speaking, people of your generation, mental health was never a thing, right? I mean, you never talked about it. And it was taboo. Maybe it was something that you just kind of silently suffered through. Is that right?
Yes, that would be correct. And I remember as a grade schooler, the only thing I ever wanted, I'd cry myself to sleep at night. All I wanted was a family that was normal. That's all I wanted. I wanted a normal family. I wanted to be like the other kids in school. Well, you and I and all of us know what normal is. Later you find out their families weren't in many ways a whole lot different than what I had. But you know, I'm going to say my age, Chad. Because,
okay, you do that.
because I want people to know that it's never too late to seek help. I'm 82 years old. And another one of the people in the group therapy said to me, he said, "How old are you?" I said, "Well, I'm 82. At that time I was 81. And he said, "You know, I'm really glad I went through the therapy when I did, because I don't have to go through a whole lifetime like you did." Mm-hmm. And again, that, you know, it's that kind of feedback to me that makes this whole thing that I'm going through, and I'm still going through it. I told you earlier, I asked my therapist, isn't there a shot I can get to get through this? Of course there isn't, and it's the brain, and you have to, I'm trying to rewire my brain so when this PTSD thing comes up, it doesn't hit me on the side of the head like a hammer. Mm-hmm. That when it comes up, if I can get my brain rewired, then it just kind of ends up being like a memory rather than this video that I'm seeing. And from what I read and from what therapists and therapy, the brain gets wired hard. Mm-hmm. And so the therapy and stuff is moving me with a rewired brain. And I'm kind of like, I don't know how many circuits are in there, but we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's, again, it's so important. And I do know a lot of people who struggle with this. And I think when we had our conversation a couple days ago, you know, as you were telling me your story, and I have listened to many people's stories. And what I always find interesting, what you also alluded to, was it wasn't until you were talking about that with other people where you realized, and other people realized, that they weren't alone. Because I think that's what happens to us so often, is that the things that we carry in life, especially the things that really are hard that we carry, and really make life less than it's meant to be, we think that we deal with that all by ourselves, and we think we're the only ones going through it, or if we're not the only ones, it's just unique to us, and you know, nobody else will understand. And I think one of the things that happens when we share stories like this is that it opens up the conversation, and all of a sudden other people, as you've mentioned, who are experiencing something maybe not identical but similar, can go, oh, yeah, and just simply realizing that somebody else knows what we know is huge.
Yeah, you see, as I have matriculated through life, I've always been able to do what I needed to do for me, and to come to the realization that there's some things I couldn't do. To come to the realization that going to group therapy was a good thing for me.
Yeah.
And I've always been a bit on the stubborn side. But again, through all of these experiences I've had, I just can't. Again, as I look back, I see these things that have happened. At the time, it was just they happened. But as I look back, these things happened for a reason, in a direction they happened. And I can't explain that other than something or somebody was watching and pointing me in directions that I went that I didn't know I was going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and that connects us right back then again to this idea of, faith and spirituality in life too. And here at Bethlehem, I mean, we will always, spirituality and faith does not preclude getting help from other organizations, other people, other, therapists, because that is also how God works in life. And yeah, it's just, I don't have words for it, Wayne. I mean, it's just really a touching story. And I want other people to be able, if they find themselves in a similar place to you, to be able to use your words as maybe that nudge that they need to take a step that they can find the help that they need. Because that's why we share our stories. And I think that does make a difference. And it continues to come back and tie into this Lenten theme of how love can be greater than despair. How the people that walk with us help us to move beyond the despair that we experience. Whether that's in a clinical setting, a group therapy setting, a congregational setting, or even just making space for people to be safe on a December night when they just need a safe place to be. And so, anything else, Wayne, that you would like to add? I mean, just final thoughts for anybody, or are you good?
I'm good. I really appreciate being able to share my story because I told my therapist that I should write a book, and then I said, people would probably think it was fiction, and she just kind of smiled and said, "No, you have some good ideas. I'd read your book." So I think I'll just end it there.
Well, very good. Well, again, thank you, Wayne, for your time, for your story. And as we continue to go deeper into this theme throughout this program year of God's agape love, how that meets us in our particular context in life, I hope that all of you who are listening, I mean, can be inspired by this and also find that love is greater than despair.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the BLC podcast. Please give us a like or a follow wherever you find yourself listening. And again, if you or somebody you know is struggling, you can find help by calling or texting 988 or by visiting the 988lifeline.org website. God bless you, and go in peace to love and serve the Lord.